Hey everybody, today I wanted to talk about appealing civil as well as criminal traffic violations. Anyone who's been driving for more than 5 minutes has probably gotten one of these. It's the Massachusetts Uniform Citation, and this is what it generally looks like. It's a small piece of paper, and there's instructions and things like that. I'll just go through it with you real quick. Obviously, there's the date up here, the officer ID number, your information here if you get pulled over, the type of car you're driving, make, model, plate, all that stuff. And then down here talks about what you did. Okay, the officer will also check off whether it's civil or criminal. Speeding has its own dedicated box because it's so common. And down here, this is really important. We're going to talk about these different types of things and what they mean. For our purposes today, you really don't need to worry about these here, arrest or warning, because if you were either arrested or you received a warning, there's literally nothing to do. You don't need to appeal it. There's nothing to appeal. As far as a warning is concerned, nothing bad can happen to you. If you are arrested, the arrest sort of takes away really your ability to appeal any of this stuff, and you have to deal with that in front of the judge. All right, so for today, what we're going to be talking about is the appealing of both civil infractions, which are right here, all right, as well as appealing criminal application. Now, first thing I want to talk about is why do you do this, okay? In the case of a criminal application, it means you committed some criminal traffic driving offense, okay? It could be anything from drunk driving to negligent operation to driving without a license, any of reckless driving, and any of the criminal leaving the scene of an accident without stopping, identifying yourself is another common one. It means you committed some criminal traffic offense, and it's very serious. So, but what's happened is if you weren't arrested, so if this box wasn't checked and you weren't taken away in cuffs, you haven't actually been charged yet. You get this ticket, and then there's what you need to do if you want to appeal it is you get the ability to go before a clerk magistrate and have them decide whether charges should issue. So it's really important that you do appeal it. Now, with regard to a civil infraction, so things like speeding, failure to stop at a stop sign, what they call a marked lanes violation, where you don't stay in your lane, or you I'm talking about change lanes without putting on a directional. That would be things like a civil infractions, and those are typically just a fine. And many people will ask the question, well, if it's just a fine, what's the point? I may end up paying an attorney or taking the time off from work. It's going to cost me more than the $100 or $200 or $300 fine in some cases. But in most cases, it's more than just a fine. It's going to cause your insurance rates to go up for a period of time. Most moving violations, these civil infractions, are also what they call surchargeable offenses. And if you pick up enough of these things, it will obviously has an effect on your insurance, but also has effect on your driver's license. All right, the registry, under certain circumstances, will suspend your license. So, for instance, if you pick up 3 speeding offenses in a rolling 12-month period, then your license will be suspended for 60 days. All right, if you, I'm just double checking that. I'm sorry, 30 days. I just double checked that. So 30 days, if you pick up 3 speeding violations in a 12-month period, it'll be a 30-day suspension. If you have 3 surchargeable events, that includes things like these moving violations, or if you get in an accident that was your fault, things like that, those also result in a license suspension. A 12-month period, you pick up 3 of those, you have an indefinite suspension until and unless you take this driver retraining course. As they go up, if you pick up 7 surchargeable events in a 3-year period, you're going to lose your license for 60 days. It goes up and up from there. So you really don't want to just consider this as just a fine. It is important to appeal it. The other reason you appeal these things is because you have the shot of actually keeping this off your driving record and actually winning these things and not having to pay anything. So let's talk about that real quick. So as far as, and I'll talk about the process a little bit before the clerk magistrate after we talk about how to actually get the hearing. So, you got this ticket, the officer filled it out, he checked off, in this case, maybe he checked off all civil, and it happens to be, and maybe it's speeding over here. Maybe you're doing, say, 50 and a 30. All right, he's going to also put in a number here. Whatever the fine amount is going to be over here, okay? And it may be multiple offenses, and they're going to be right here, okay? So how do you appeal it? All right, what you want to do, it says see instructions on the back, instruction A on the back. So let's get those real quick so I can show those to you and what those look like. Now, this is the back of the ticket, and you can see in the back of the ticket, and we've highlighted some things here. Instructions for civil infractions, and down below here is for criminal. We're just going to talk about civil right now. So I'm going to highlight, I'm going to move, let me do this. I'm going to focus on this. So all civil infractions, the most important thing you need to understand is you do have a limited period of time to do this. You only got 20 days, and that's listed right here. It's listed right here. If I can get the pen thing to work better. Right here, you only have 20 days to send this in. Now, it's important to know you're not, the instructions, most people have a hard time with these instructions. If you want to pay the citation, meaning you don't want to fight it, you look at box number 1, but we're not talking about that today. We're going to just say box number 1, no good. We don't want to deal with box number 1 right now. Because that's it, you're admitting fault, you're not appealing it, you're saying, I did it, here, just take my money, and that's it, okay? So we're not really talking about that today, but we're going to talk about box number 2 is where you want to request a court hearing, and that's right down here. In box number 2, you get to request a court hearing. There's a $25 fee on a civil offense to request that court hearing. That $25 is right here. Usually the police will give you an envelope with the citation, so you don't have to fill in the address, but in case you need to, understand that it doesn't go to the court in your area, it goes to what they call a citation processing center, which is at the Registry of Motor Vehicles. So what happens is they get that, and then they send it out to the court, and the court will ultimately send you a notice to come in for a hearing, okay? So you want to go in the back of the ticket, look under instructions A here, which is the top part, jump right over number 1, go down to number 2. You want to sign here, you want to date it, and you want to mail it to the Citation Processing Center. Now, here's the thing. Because you're sending it to a P.O. box in Boston, this processing center, it's really important that you document as much as possible what you did here. So take a photocopy of the ticket front and back, take a photocopy of the check you're going to be sending in with it, that $25 check you're going to send in with it, take a photocopy of those things, and make sure, and I also like to take a photocopy of the stamped envelope, right? Now, and if you can, it's not a bad idea to send this thing in certified mail. That way you have a receipt or some way to track that it actually got there, just in case it, it doesn't get there or they process it wrong. Now you have some proof that you sent it in, and there's something we can do about that later if for some reason they don't give you the hearing that you sought, even though you did send it in on time. Just keep as much proof as possible that you sent it on time. Oftentimes what I say to clients is, just give me the citation, sign it, give me the $25, we'll send it in for you, and that's going to actually help to prove it as well. We send a cover letter, and we have proof of it, and if the court ever questions it, we say, hey, listen, we definitely did this, and here's the proof of it. So really important to do that, okay? That's as to a civil offense, and that's how you do that one, okay? Now, as to the criminal one, which we talked about a minute ago, that's the instructions over here. So you go all the way down to instructions B. So let's just say you picked up something like, I don't know, like leaving the scene of an accident, right? You are driving without a license. That is a criminal offense, and you should appeal. You should always appeal this, because this is your best opportunity to keep these charges from ever issuing. Just because the officer gave you the citation and he's going to send to the court, if you do nothing, these charges will automatically issue. You're going to have to go see the judge, and it just gets more serious. This is your opportunity to keep that from ever happening by trying to get a clerk magistrate to either sympathize with you or show them why the officer is wrong. That's why you should always submit for on a criminal application. It's really a no-brainer. Here's the thing, though. You only, on a criminal application, you have even less time than the civil application. You only have 4 days to get this thing in, and it's not going up here. It's not going up here. So ignore this when it comes to criminal. You really want to send that to the court, and the court is listed on the front of the citation. So going back, this pen thing, going back to the front of the citation, the court address for this should be in the situation listed right here. Okay. So they should. So wherever you were, if you were, say, in Woburn, where we're at, the Woburn District Court will be listed here, okay? And it's the court for the area that you're in. And not every town has a court, so it could be, you could be, for instance, in Lexington, and that goes to the Concord District Court. But the officer should have written the court address in here to tell you where to take it. And if you're not sure, you can look it up online, or you can give us a call. I'm happy to walk you through that part of it to make sure you're getting it to the right place. We always recommend on this citation, on this portion of it, though, when you're dealing with the criminal side of things, is to don't trust the mail. You only have 4 days to get it in. If you don't, they might not give you that hearing. So if you're going to appeal it, and we always think you should, you walk it in, right? You bring it in, you sign it right here, you date it right here. You don't have to put any money with it. It's not like a civil. We got to pay that $25. You just walk it into the court. And make sure you make a photocopy yourself before you get there, and ask them to stamp your photocopy. All right, the court will actually put a date stamp saying that they received on a particular date. That way, you just have proof in case for some reason it gets lost in the shuffle and that you actually did go ahead and appeal this ticket. Okay. Now, what's going to happen in each of these situations, either civil or criminal, is you're going to get a notice in the mail from the court. And actually, before I jump to that, I do want to show you the state police have started using these tickets. Now, they look very similar in the front, but what they are is they're electronic. So the old ticket style system, all the police had were ticket books, and they had multiple copies, one for them, one for the courts, one for you. These days, what the state police have started to do, and eventually I think all the police departments will do it, is go to this electronic ticket, all right? It looks very much like, if you're old enough, you remember the old fax paper, the rolled paper that's glossy paper. That's what, they have a printer in their car, and it shoots this thing out after all the information's put in. This is actually something from a client we had, but we just blacked out their information and all that. And this was a criminal offense that we were actually appealing to the clerk magistrate. As you can see, like we talked about before, they do have criminal application checked off here. The offenses here are in fact criminal in nature. There was no arrest in this particular case. And so the reason I wanted to show you this is, even though the top part looks very similar, the bottom here, you see how they have the court address here for this particular person. The court address is right here. And even though this is very similar, what's different is the instructions. Because this was printed out, and it was printed out as a criminal application, meaning they're seeking criminal charges, it's important to understand that because it's criminal application, they only print out those instructions. So when the officer checks off criminal application like that, they also show in this case the person it wasn't given to them in hand, because they have to show how they gave it to them, all right? So they gave it to either the person in hand, they mailed it in this case, or in hand to an agent, like a friend or a family member. And so anyway, because what I was going to show you here is the instructions are different, right? So the instructions are the same in the sense that it still only have 4 days to appeal it, and they say pretty much the same thing, but on this electronic ticket, it's a little less confusing because there's no backside to it. There's nothing printed on the back. And the instructions are only the instructions for the type of violation you got. So in many ways, it's actually much simpler for this type of ticket. So if you get this type of ticket, don't get confused. If you've watched this video and you go, wait a minute, there's no backside to this thing. It's just because it's different. And actually, in many ways, it's much simpler. It's very clear just by looking down near the bottom of the ticket what you need to do. So in this case, the person signed the name, dated it, and we got into the court. That was actually court timestamp, date and timestamp that I was talking about before we blacked out. But that is the electronic ticket. Now, what do you do? So now you've sent it in, you've done exactly what you're supposed to do, like we talked about, gotten it to the court. What happens next? And in both cases, you're going to get a notice from the court. Now, I wish I could tell you exactly how long this is going to take. I can't, because every court is different. Okay, so you have some courts might be a couple of weeks. I had one court, we kept following up with them and following up with them because it was like 8 months before we ever got a hearing for this kid on a speeding ticket he got. So it just depends, honestly, on how busy the court is, how quickly they're scheduling them. It could be anywhere, like I said, from a couple of weeks to 3, 4, 5 months before you get notice from the court. But if you have your proof that you got it in on time, then you should be fine. And quite frankly, if they never get notice of the hearing and it goes by, you'll get a separate notice from the registry saying, hey, you missed your hearing, now you get to pay this thing. So, but just be patient. You're going to get the notice from the court. Now, in the case of a criminal application, the notice is going to say that. It's going to say that you've been welcome to come to what they call a show cause or a clerk magistrate's hearing. And the magistrate's job in that hearing is to decide whether or not there's probable cause to issue the charge. In this case, this is a drunk driving charge as well as negligent operation. And there's a civil offense here for Mark Lane. So the rest of these are criminal. This bottom one was civil. So the job of the clerk magistrate is to decide whether there's enough evidence based upon what the police officer writes in their report to issue this charge in the first place. And at this point in time, you haven't been charged yet. There's nothing on your record. There's no charges. You haven't been before a judge. You can still honestly say to anybody at this point in time, you have no record at all of these charges. And this is your best opportunity to keep that from happening. So, like I said, at this hearing, the clerk's job is to decide, is there probable cause, right? Or if there isn't enough evidence, he says there's no probable cause, right? If there's probable cause, he's supposed to, issue the charges and you go see the judge. If there isn't, he can't issue the charges and you have a nice day. It stays off your record forever. And then there's this third option that we always talk about. I like to think of it as like a hybrid option, right? And this is where a clerk might say something like, hey, you know what? We think there's probable cause here. It seems like there might be. But you seem like a good person. It's a simple mistake, and we want to give you a break. And the clerk can do a number of things here. The clerk can just outright dismiss the charges in the interest of justice if they think that's appropriate. The clerk can make you do stuff there like community service. Or something like that, or take a class. Oftentimes in driving cases, they might take you to take a driver retraining class or something like that. That is possible. So the clerk has a lot of discretion as to what to do, whether to issue the charge or not issue the charge. So that's one of the reasons I say, particularly with a criminal case, it's so important to always appeal, to make sure, because this is your best opportunity to keep your record clean. It's also the least expensive option, particularly if you're hiring a lawyer. It's way less expensive to try if you win it at this stage than if you have to go all the way through into court to see the judge, multiple appearances. It just gets more expensive for you as well. So that's one of the main reasons we say, hey, you always want to appeal a criminal application, because you might get a clerk who's sympathetic to your cause and is willing to, even if you did do it. Sometimes you have a case where we go in and there's a defense. There's a good reason why the person was doing that, or maybe there wasn't them doing this. So sometimes we have those things, and then there's other times where the person clearly did it, and we're going in where we're talking about the person. Sometimes what we do is we go to the registry of motor vehicles and actually pull their driving record to show they have a great driving record and show whether they're a great person. They have no prior criminal record. These are some of the types of things you might argue with this type of hearing. All right. Now, going back to if it's just a civil case, right? And I'll just get out of this for a second. So it's just a civil case up here. And in that case, we're talking about just this box is checked, all civil infractions, and it's just those fines. And same thing. We typically will pull the person's driving record. You're also going before a clerk magistrate, and the clerk magistrate's job is to decide based upon what he's hearing from the police and hearing from you is whether or not you're responsible. They don't call it guilty or not guilty in the civil side. They call it responsible or not responsible. And the clerk also has a lot of discretion here. If you have a good driving record, if you're generally speaking a good person, if this is going to have a huge effect on your life, such as you might lose your license and potentially lose your job. Because like I was saying before, it's not always about the fine. It can be about the insurance. It can be about potentially losing your license. If you are a commercial driver's license, a CDL, it's particularly serious because you can have almost nothing on your record without having some sort of issue. If you're a junior operator, even a civil infraction, while you're still on your junior operator's license, it's going to have a huge effect on that, and you're likely to have a suspension if you don't do something about that. So, but when you go to this hearing, it's the same idea that the police officer are really a representative usually from the department. It's rare that you see the same cop who gave you the ticket at this hearing. You may not even remember what he looks like, but it's almost never him. It's usually some representative who's sent there with all the tickets that day, and they just read from either the ticket or the report to establish why they think the particular offense is appropriate. In a case like this, a lot of the same things apply. You appeal to the clerk magistrate's sense of fairness. In some cases, other times you have an actual defense to the charges. So it really depends on the circumstances. But again, the clerk magistrate has a lot of discretion to do what they think is right in these circumstances, and that's why we always say you should appeal. You have a good shot. And one thing I will say about both criminal applications as well as civil applications at these hearings before the clerk magistrate is the clerk magistrate is not a judge. Some of them are lawyers, but they're not required to be. Most clerk magistrates will look at things with more of a practical eye than a technical eye. What I mean by that is, that they're not always looking at the legal technicalities. And many times, many of them, they don't want to hear about it. They want to hear about the person. They want to hear about the situation. They don't get overly technical. Some do, but for the most part, I think most clerks are come at it from a much more practical standpoint, and they want to give good people a shot if they can. Sometimes they can't, but you have to know your audience. So it's important to understand, who you might be going in front of when you do this. And if you're doing it yourself, you may not understand that. As a lawyer who does a lot of these things, we have a pretty good flavor for what we can expect when we get to a particular court, who we might get as the clerk magistrate that day, and what they want to hear, so we can sort of temper our argument to the individual, which is a very important piece of this puzzle. So that's pretty much it as to how to appeal both a criminal as well as a civil traffic citation, what you should do, how to do it, so the mechanics of doing it. And if you have any questions about this or anything related to these traffic offenses, please feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to speak to you about it. All right. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, everyone.